All right, fam, here we go. Unit 7, brand new packet, second semester, day 2, so second day. I'm going to go through a couple examples of what we learned yesterday just to refresh your memory, and then you're off and running, okay? 24, remember when there is no number right here in front of the radical, that means it's like an understood 2. You don't have to put the 2 there, but as you know, there are other problems where there's a 3 here, or you might even do some different numbers. So if there's no number, we're looking for groups of 2. And what I'm going to do for 24 is I'm going to break it down. What times what is 24? First thing I think of is 8 and 3. Yes, you could also have written 6 and 4, or you could have written 12 and 2. You just break it down whatever the first way you think of is, and that'll work. We'll get the same answer at the end as long as you don't make a mistake somewhere. 8 breaks down into 4 and 2, and 4 breaks down into 2 and 2. So I can't break down 2 anymore because it's just 2 and 1. So this is done, and 3 is just 3 and 1. So now remember what the goal is I'm looking for groups of 2. There's a group of 2. They get to come out in front as a 2. And what numbers have to stay inside that don't have a partner to get out of jail, if you will? This 2 and this 3 have to stay inside the radical. So 2 times 3 makes 6. Remember, when you have a partner to get out with, the group of 2 is what gets out of jail, and it is represented by a whole number 2 on the outside of the jail or the radical. Whatever doesn't get circled gets multiplied together and has to stay inside. That's our final answer. Let me do another one. Let's go to let me try 3. 80. There's a bunch of ways to break down 80. The first thing I think of is 8 and 10, and you might have thought of different numbers. Go for it. It doesn't matter what numbers you start with. We're going to break it all the way down at the end. 8 is 4 times 2, and 4 can break down some more. And for 10, I get 2 and 5. Does it matter what order you write them in? It doesn't. We're just looking for groups of 2, so here we go. There's a group of 2, and there's another group of 2. So the 2 comes out, and another 2 comes out. So 2 times 2 is 4 on the outside. And I'm keeping that negative sign that is right here. I'm just keeping it in my answer. And what number didn't get circled? The 5. That's what has to stay in jail, and that is how we're going to break down our answer. So remember, I have one group of 2, so that comes out as a 2. And I have another group of 2, which comes out as a second 2. And 2 times 2 is how I got 4. Let me try one more, like with a 3. Yes, I'm going to do number 7. Let me break down 54. So, hey, look, this 3, that means we're circling groups of 3. So you only get to get out of jail if you have 3 people or 3 of the same number. So 54, what times what is 54? Let's see, I'm thinking, it divides by 2, so 2 and 27. Yeah, you could have also done, 9 and 6? Or 3 and something else? Okay, let's just keep breaking it down. 2's done, but 27 is 9 and 3. 3 can't be broken down anymore, but 9 can be broken down into 3 and 3. Okay, so now don't go circling partners because this is a different kind of radical. This has a 3 in front of it, so that means we need groups of 3. Found a group of 3. They get to get out of jail. That 2, don't lose it at the very beginning. That has to stay inside. It doesn't have any friends to break out of jail with it. Okay, so I'm going to put the 3 on the outside because this group of 3 got out. And I'm going to keep the radical the exact same, so it's still this little cubed root. Doesn't really look like a 3 there. Let me make this a little smaller. There we go. And what's the number that had to stay in jail? The 2. That gets written here. So that is how you write that final answer. Let me do one of these harder ones, like number 10. I'm just going to take this one step at a time. So I'm just going to break down the 18 first, and I'm going to ignore all of this stuff. I'm going to do one thing at a time. First, I'm going to start with the whole number, which is 18. This is just a normal radical. There's just an imaginary 2 hanging out here, right? So we're looking for groups of 2. 18 is 9 and 2, and then 9 breaks down to 3 and 3. And I think I can't break down any of those numbers anymore, but there is my group that gets out of jail. So I have a 3 on the outside, and this 2 has to stay on the inside. I'm going to give myself some space to write my final answer, because I'm just doing the numbers right now and I have all these letters I still need to deal with. So there's a group of 2 that got to bust out of jail, and I'm writing that on the outside of the radical. And this 2 that didn't have any partners to break out with has to stay inside. Now let's look at the x to the 10th. can you tell me how many groups of 2 are in 10? So remember, what we talked about in class is if I write 10 x's and we circle groups of 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5 of them. So that group gets out, that group gets out. This is what we talked about yesterday. That group gets out. I have 5 groups that get out of jail, 5 groups of x's. That's why I'm writing x to the 5th on the outside. They all broke out and there were none left over. I didn't have any that didn't get circled. So I'm going to have no x's left next to the 2. Now let's talk about the y's. Maybe I'll do a different color. For the y's, there's 3 y's. I need to circle groups of 2. There's 1. So that means I have 1 group of 2 y's. 1 group gets out and 1 y has to stay in. Now let me talk about the z's. For z, there's 11 of them. I'm not going to write them all out, but how many groups of 2 are there in 11? So you're doing 11 divided by 2. There's 5 groups of 2 in 11. And if you would write them all out, I guess I will. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's a group, there's a group, there's a group, there's a group, there's a group. That represents my 5 groups that busted out of jail. But there's one poor little z that has to stay in jail that's left over, okay? And there's how I'm going to write my final answer. Let me just make a note here. Be careful that this 5 doesn't look like it's in this radical here. There's no number there. This is just a normal like square root with an imaginary 2 there, so don't make that 5 look like it's right here, okay? Anyways, let me do a couple of the other types of examples where you multiply. What you're doing here is you're just taking whole number times whole number, so like outside numbers. 9 times 2 is 18. And then you're taking inside numbers. 2 times 12 is 24. So that's how you like do your first step, is you just take your 2 and your 9 and multiply them. And then you take your your 2 and your 12 and multiply those, and those stay inside the radical. And then, of course, you know what to do after this. We're just going to do what we learned yesterday. I'm going to break down the 24. 2 and 12, there's other combos that you could use. 2 and 6, 2 and 3. I'm looking for groups of 2, right? It's just a normal square root with just an imaginary 2 in front. There's a group of 2, which gets to come out. That number didn't get circled, and that number didn't get circled. So how do I write my final answer? I'm going to take 18 and multiply it by the group of 2 that came out, which was a 2. 18 times 2 is 36 on the outside. And what numbers had to stay in? The 2 and the 3. So 2 times 3 is 6. That's how we write our final answer. That is a breeze on what we learned yesterday. So keep working, and I'll be walking around helping you guys. Thank you for watching. Love you all.